the unsexiest industries in the world. It's the locksmithing industry. So I'm Kris, I'm the CTO. I'm interested in things like robotics, artificial intelligence, security, I also like ethics. I think that's cool. So what do? We copy keys and we solve lockouts. Not terribly interesting. This is the same thing that locksmiths do every day. So let me tell you a bit about that. Copying keys. This is a typical looking key. You've got a head, a blade, and some grooves cut into it. It's called the bitting. And when you want to copy the key, basically you take a blank and then you make these trapezoidal cuts into the blade, and that's how you get this teeth pattern. And the teeth, the triangles you see don't actually matter. It's the flat parts that create the platform that the pins sink into and then you turn the lock. So that's how you copy a key. Typically you do it on a machine like this. It's a tracing machine. You clamp the original and the blank in there and then move them together to make the copy against this blade. And you don't actually need a machine. There are people who actually do this thing called key impressioning, and it's a competition. It's like a sports competition in Europe and other places where they just take a blank like this, they stick it into a lock, and they jiggle it, and then they look at it, and the pins, when they hit the blade, will make little marks, and they'll take a file and file it down, and they try to see how quickly they can make a key for a lock without the original. And some of these guys are so good they can do it in about a minute. So you can think, this guy walks to your house, he's got a blank, he stands there for a minute, and then he's in. It's almost faster than lock picking, but not quite. Okay, cool. Solving lockouts. So what do people do now? They call a locksmith. He comes in like an hour or two, depending on time of day. Charges you $100, $200, $400, maybe $800, depending on what it is. Another option is to break into your own place. Some people who live in the suburbs have this option. They can like smash a window and climb in, but if you're on the 10th story, it doesn't work that well in Manhattan. Most people though just wait around for a family member, or a friend, or a landlord, or somebody to come let them in, because they're so averse to paying the hundreds of dollars for a locksmith. Okay, so what do? We have two products. The first one's a kiosk. This is a robotic kiosk. And basically this guy, you can walk up to it and stick your key in, and then it'll scan it, and then 30 seconds later it'll make a copy for you, which is kind of neat, right? Self-service key identification. But what's really nice about this is, since it's a robotic system, you can remember what your key looks like. So you can say, hey, save my key in your system, and then if you ever lose your key or you get locked out, you just go back and scan your fingerprint, and then it makes a new one for you without the original. So it's just a way to solve lockouts. And then we also have this mobile app, which does similar stuff. You can scan keys, and then you can mail order keys, and we'll make them at our office to send them in the mail. You can download key cutting instructions, which are a set of instructions a locksmith would understand. You could show him your app and be like, hey, can you make this key? And then he'll make it, and then you'll be back in your place. So it's like turning a locksmith into a kiosk, if you're not near a kiosk. And then we also just launched a delivery service. If you don't have time to like go to the locksmiths or go to the kiosk, we'll just bring you a key wherever you are. So that's what we do. So let me just tell you some typical stories. Here's a typical story of something that happened recently. A guy was on Thanksgiving, his in-laws are coming over, he's got a turkey in the oven, and he locks himself out. And he's like, oh, what am I gonna do? All the locksmiths aren't picking up their phones. And then he remembers, I made a key at this kiosk at Bed Bath & Beyond a few weeks ago. I can just go back there and make another one, but Bed Bath & Beyond's closed because it's Thanksgiving. So he calls us and we're like, no problem. We gave his key to a bike messenger and he just wrote it over. And he was back in before the turkey burned. So it's a pretty typical story with us, trying to help people out. Here's a more interesting one. So this lady, one of our customers, got married. Great. After she got married, she decided to go on a trip to Germany. But when she was trying to leave, the TSA or the German equivalent, I guess they look something like that, they noticed one of her documents had her new name and one had her maiden name, so they wouldn't let her leave. So she was very upset, obviously. I can't go back to my hubby and do this. So what she do, she grabs her app, she scans her key, she digitally sends her key to her neighbor, and goes down to her kiosk and makes the key, and then he goes to her apartment, grabs the marriage license, and then mails it to her and she gets out the next day. Great, right? So people come up with cool uses for our technology that we didn't really envision, but we're glad to be able to help people out. So how does this stuff work? Let's talk about our tech stack. On the kiosk side, we've got a Linux computer that's controlling everything inside. It does a lot of actuator control, path planning, machine vision, machine learning. And most of that's programmed in C++ and Python. And we use OpenCV pretty heavily. Machine vision people will know what that is. We use HTML, JavaScript, and CSS for the touchscreen interface. It's basically like a web page that's just running locally on the machine. And then we only have an iOS app because that's what our investors wanted, and it's pretty good for New York. A lot of people have iPhones. So Objective-C, it's written natively. And then these two guys connect to a Ruby on Rails API layer that's living on Amazon Web Services. And then all the customer data and stuff goes on into a Postgres database that lives on Heroku. And then the Ruby on Rails API layer also sometimes spins up EC2 instances that can do image processing. We have some C++ applications that run there, and they pull data from S3. So for example, on the kiosk, all the image processing happens on board. So you stick your key in, we've got video streams going, we do all the analysis, and then we extract the geometric information about the key in the kiosk. And then that can get directly uploaded to our database. But for mobile phones and iPads and things, the hardware isn't good enough to do all that processing on board. So what we actually do is we have this guy upload images to S3. S3, for those who don't know, is just a storage system that Amazon has. It's a cloud storage. So the images get uploaded to S3, and then the iPhone says, hey, can you process these to the API layer? API layer spins up some virtual cloud servers that then take the images, process them, and then return the results. We can talk more about that later if there are any engineers who are interested in the tech stack. So fundraising is the other big thing that people are usually interested in with startups, so we'll talk a bit about that. We didn't actually have any money to start. So we were moonlighting. I had a job, we were working at night. A lot of the guys were students up in Columbia, so just after they were done with classes or I was done with work, we'd meet up at night and work through the late hours. Then we did a friends and family round with some angel investors also, and we raised $300K. And that was enough money that we were comfortable saying, okay, we can give ourselves a little bit of salary to very little amount of salary to just pay rent and food and work on this for a little while. And so I quit my job, and those guys dropped out of school, and we built our first prototypes. And you can see this is a prototype kiosk. This is a little yellow box. It's really ugly. It didn't work that well, but it sort of proved the concept. And we actually took this thing and put it outside on the streets and be like, hey, do you want to make a copy of your key? It only did one key type, so like 90% of people couldn't even use it if they wanted to. But we just got some user feedback. This is a little Android tablet that we had as our first user interface, and some fingerprint scanners and stuff. But it was basically cardboard. But it was good enough that we were able to iterate and make more prototypes and then go before VCs and find one that was interested in investing. So the 300K got us like almost a year of development, and then we talked to Battery Ventures, who gave us over $2 million, which we then used to make more legit prototypes. So we put these 5 pretty good-looking kiosks out in 7-Elevens and Bed Bath & Beyond in Manhattan, and that's sort of what we've been working with lately. We also make one for testing, like we have this one in our office that we do all the development work on. And then going from there, we're just basically working on technology, improving that, and then looking to grow the business. So that's sort of the whole presentation. This is our team. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, I'd love to talk about tech or business stuff.
Great. Thank you very much. Questions? I have a question. Actually, you have a lot of very attractive people in your presentation. Is your initial niche target market models or like that?
we like to help everybody, but there have been a lot of our customers are very attractive.
So what surprised you most in terms of what you think you are going to be able to build fairly easily and turn out to be really tricky?
The original KeyMe kiosk prototype actually stored physical keys. So you would take a physical key and stick it in, and it would just hold it for you until you got locked out. But nobody liked that. No one wanted to go through the effort of putting a key in, and it was just a bad business model. So I guess that was surprising, or we didn't think it had enough. But then we realized when we were doing the next generation that there are actually thousands of different types of keys, and you have to understand all of them, or at least a lot of them, in order to service people. So just the amount of work we were trying to chew on was a lot larger than we thought it was originally.
Hey, I'm Mark Borer from Labs.
I was just curious,
A lot of times, founders will say, "This is why I did this. This is what my background is." You said yourself, "This is a sexy industry." Like, what made you stand up going to keys? Like, what was your background?
Ooh, okay. My background is robotics. The decision to go on into it was purely business-based, economically based. It's a huge industry. It's like $4.5 billion a year in the U.S. Roughly half of that's key duplication and half of it's lockouts. And also, there's a pretty high human error rate when making keys and trying to solve lockouts. So it's just something that seemed like robots can do a lot better job at doing these jobs, and also a huge market opportunity.
What's the pricing model? How much do I pay?
It's $3 if you want a copy of your key, and then we have those various services we offer. So like $10 if you want to download instructions, $20 if you want a physical key when you're locked out, $30 if you want it delivered to you, $60 if you want it rush delivered, that kind of thing.
The app.
Huh?
What about the app?
The app's free, so it's like free lockout insurance. Just download it, scan keys.
Field full-time design. In a market like New York City, where you've got obviously significant amount of people getting locked out just due to the population, I've also got a lot of different types of locks, which I think you mentioned. There's Medico, Multi-Lock, Schlage, Arrow. I've worked in hardware for a really long time, so I know that special lengths, where the channels are inverted, or the landlord doesn't want you to have access to the hardware store to go in and copy the key. How do you plan on overcoming those hurdles?
It's basically just a pain in the ass. So, like I said, thousands of different key types, and every time someone uses our app at the kiosk and they have some niche key that is only used in their building in New York, we get like a 1-star rating, and they hate on us on the internet. But the only thing we can do is keep trying to add keys and support more people. So it's just part of our job every day.
Hi, Matt Hogan from Data what do you think percentage-wise, if just kind of ballpark it, the attrition rate is of this market? Obviously, there's a lot of new technology coming to fruition around like people being able to get the locks or get through into doors without actual keys anymore. I mean, I don't know. There's lots about it. I don't know if you think.
We think about those guys, but it's so small. It's not really something we've even tried to quantify. People are adverse to paying a few dollars, like $10 to get a key when they're locked out. A lot of people would just rather sit around, but people are much more adverse to paying a couple $100 to retrofit their hardware. So I think in the long run, those guys, the electronic locks will do very well, but physical keys are here to stay for the short run, and there are lots of people who need help right now with their physical locks. So that's what we're about.
I agree with OpenText. Security seems like a really key part of this whole business model, right? Somebody gets a hold of somebody else's key and but not one walks in the place. How do you verify that the person who's trying to get a key made at the kiosk is actually the person that's supposed to be allowed to get it?
Yeah, we actually can't do that, and nobody can. But our process is a lot better than the status quo. So nowadays, you can just go to any hardware store in Chinatown or something, get a key with cash, and nobody knows about it. And it doesn't matter if it's stamped "Do Not Duplicate" or whatever. At least with our kiosks, we have timestamps and electronic records of that transaction, so we know what's happening. And with the mobile app, we do similar things where we're tracking, and we've actually tried to make the machine vision less good than it could be, just so people can't do fly-by key processing. They can't just like walk up and snap photos. We make them do both sides and lay it on a flat table. But our main strategy for security is to keep as little information about people as possible. So we don't know where people live, we don't know their names, we just know their email address, and we have some encrypted data about a key geometric information that even if you were to get a dump of our database and decrypt it, you would just have this geometric information that you have to then decode. You have to hire a locksmith to decode, and then buy a $5,000 cutting machine, and then cut the key, and then figure out where they live. And at the end of the day, it's just easier to kick down a door, pick a lock, right?
How do you go to market? Do you partner with the kiosk locations, or do you have another strategy?
For the kiosk, we just needed a place to put them. So 24 hours was something we were looking for, and 7-Eleven provided that. So people at all hours of the night could go to their keys. So we just rent space from them. Same thing, Bed Bath & Beyond. But those are great stories because we can sort of roll those out nationally when we're ready. But like Swinblake was saying, it's hard with hardware to just grow exponentially. If we're doing that now, raising capital to then build our next big batch of units and spread them out.
Where do you make the kiosks? Where would you have them manufactured?
Minnesota.
Minnesota, finished U.S. production. Are you thinking of China later down the road, or?
Maybe eventually, but my personal philosophy is when I'm working with people, I want them as close as possible for development work. So like, it's better to have an engineer working for you that you can actually strangle than someone you have to like yell at over the telephone. And I can actually fly to Minnesota and yell at people, but China's kind of a long trip. So eventually we'll get there, but not in the short term.
And what part of the what are the production system that you outsource versus having in-house? What does the team look like on the hardware?
That's a good question. When we were starting out, we were very hardware heavy, so we had mechanical engineers and robotics engineers. But once we got all the prototype stuff done and all the hardware things figured out, the team started transitioning more towards software, machine vision, machine learning. So I'd say we're mostly software engineers and business people now.
Mike Harris with at $3 a key and those kiosks and rent, I mean, what's the break even? How many keys do you need to make in a given month? How many do you need to get to make this, kiosk profitable and, kind of that sort of usual?
Yeah. So that's a great question. For the kiosk business, basically all you're concerned about is unit economics. So how much does the machine cost and how much revenue is it generating over a certain period over the lifetime, basically. So for our initial approach, like the very first unit we built, it would never pay back the amount of money and effort we put into it just selling keys every day. But in large batches, the cost of the kiosk actually comes down a lot. So I guess just to ballpark it, each kiosk probably needs to make 5 to 10 keys a day to do very well, to have good unit economics. I don't remember exactly what the break-even is, but this thing is just sitting there every day, and if a couple people use it, then over the course of a year or two, it not only pays back the amount you put in up front, but also generates some nice profit for you.
Great. That was what we got.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.